So you're scrolling on LinkedIn and you see someone celebrating on LinkedIn. They got a new job at McKinsey, Google, or Goldman Sachs. And you think to yourself, if I could just land one of these roles, all my problems would be solved. I'd finally feel financially secure and I would be successful. But here's the truth, guys. Just because the salaries look incredible on paper does not mean the reality matches what you're imagining. And I know it because I have lived it. I used to think the exact same thing when I was a university student, that landing a dream job at a top consulting firm would solve all my problems. And in some ways, it did, but in other ways, it was very different from what I had imagined. And last year, I made £125,000 as a consultant. But after taxes, mortgages, and actually living in London, I had just £350 left in my account. £350 every single month. And honestly, I'm not really here to complain. I know that I was in an incredibly privileged position. I know that very well. But I think it's very important to show the reality because the gap between what the dream salaries look like from the outside versus what it actually feels like on the inside can be very, very different. So today, I'm pulling back the curtain on exactly how much I made as a consultant, how much I actually kept after the UK's brutal tax system, and where every single pound went every month. And some of this might surprise you, and some of this might make you rethink what high salaries mean in London especially, but it's all the truth from my end. Hello everyone, if you're new to this channel, my name is Jack and I'm a former consultant at Bain with over 5 years of consulting experience, and now I coach students one-on-one to help them break into their dream consulting jobs. And in today's video, I'm doing a full financial breakdown of my last year's salary as a consultant in London. This is going to be transparent, uncomfortable at some times, but really valuable if you're thinking about a career in consulting or high finance. With that being said, here's the agenda, right? First, I'll break down my exact salary, so my base salary and my bonus for the last year. Second, I'll talk about where every single pound of my salary went. And finally, I'll share with you how it all actually felt. The honest truth about earning 125k and why I still didn't feel rich yet in London. But before we start, I just wanted to ask if you can hit that like button and subscribe because it would really help support this channel. I know talking about money can be uncomfortable at times, especially in the UK, but the transparency should hopefully help people make better career decisions. All right, so with that being said, let's get straight into the numbers. Okay, so let me give you a bit of context first, right? So I was working in consulting for over 5 years in London. For transparency, I started at EY Parthenon and then moved to Bain, where I spent about 3.5 years of my consulting career in. And then I quit about 2-3 months ago, and I actually recently made a video on why I quit consulting, so feel free to check that out if you're interested in the full story. But let's jump straight to the numbers because that's what you came for. Now, there are two components to your income in consulting, right? So your base salary and your performance bonus. In my last year in consulting, I was making slightly above £100,000 in base salary. This is all public information anyway, by the way. So if you look at consulting salary databases or forums like Wall Street Oasis, these numbers are pretty well documented for each level. So I'm not gatekeeping anything here. And then there's the bonus, right? Mine was around £25,000 for that year. Now, here's the thing about bonuses, because the salary is fixed and the same for everyone at your level, but just like in any other consulting firm, investment bank for instance, your bonus is dependent on your performance rating. So if you have an exceptional year, your bonus could be higher, and if you have a rough year or the firm isn't doing well, then it could be lower or even zero in some rare cases. So total compensation came to £100,000 salary plus 25 bonus, £125,000 of annual compensation for the year. I mean, on paper, it looks incredible, right? Most people would see 6 figures and think, wow, you've kind of made it. But here comes the painful part. Let's actually talk about how much I took home after the heavy tax system in the UK. All right, so this is where it gets depressing. Let's calculate my post-tax income, and trust me, the tax system does get brutal once you hit that 100k mark in the UK. Okay, so let's start with the salary component of £100,000 per year. So my pre-tax income was 100k divided by 12, which was approximately 8,333 per month. And then the automatic first deduction was national insurance of around 334 per month. And that left me with just £8,000 of taxable income per month. Now, in terms of taxes, note that in the UK, the tax system works incrementally, right? So you're not taxed at one flat rate, you're taxed in bands. So 0% on the first 12,570,
which is known as the personal allowance, and then 20% on income between 12,571 to 50,270, and then 40%, and then lastly 45%. For someone earning 100k, after running through all the different bands, I was being taxed at around £2,286 per month. So that means my monthly take-home pay was approximately £5,713 a month. And let me just pause here because that's 8,333 down to 5,713. So I'm losing £2,600 per month to tax and national insurance, which was around 30% of my gross salary before I even got to see it. But wait up because it gets worse. So now let's talk about the bonus that I got. My bonus for the year, as I said, was £25,000. Now, here's something that most people don't know about UK taxes. There's this brutal thing called the 60% tax trap. Once your income reaches 125,140, you start losing your personal allowance of 12,570. So every £2 you earn above 100k, you lose £1 of personal allowance. And this effectively creates a 60% tax rate on income between 100k and 125k. And unfortunately, my bonus of 25k pushed me right into this trap. And for simplicity, let's say it was a 60% effective tax rate, which hit my bonus. I was left with just £10,000 of take home from that 25k bonus, right? So £25,000 bonus and £10,000 in my pocket. More than half went to taxes. Can you believe it? Because I honestly couldn't. So to summarize, my salary was 100k, of which I took home 68,560 from an annual perspective. My bonus, on the other hand, was £25,000, of which I took home just £10,000. Therefore, my total take home for my last year as a consultant was £78,560 out of £125,000. I mean, I was losing almost 47k to taxes. That's 37% of my total compensation gone.
And this is the reality that no one talks about when they see those 100k flashy salaries in consulting. Okay, so now that we know that my monthly take home every month was £5,700, let's now look at where every single pound went. And here's an important note before we start. I didn't spend my money month to month as if my bonus was guaranteed, because A, bonus is not guaranteed. It really depends on your performance and the firm's performance. And B, because that would be totally irresponsible, right? So essentially, I lived off my monthly salary and treated my bonus as and when it came. So let's break down my monthly expenses.
Now, if you look at my monthly spending, of the £5,713 of monthly income I had, my first monthly expenditure was mortgage and bills at £3,100 a month. This was my biggest expense by far. And let me just talk about my living situation because I think it's important context, right? So I lived in a 2-bedroom flat in London. It is in a nice modern building in a nice area. Nothing fancy, but pretty comfortable, I would say. Now, here's where I made a huge financial mistake, right? Because I miscalculated and I remortgaged at the absolute height of the interest rate spike, my mortgage payments have been outrageous. Now, if I had just locked in my mortgage for 5 years when I initially bought the flat, I would be paying significantly less, but hey, we all make financial mistakes when we're young, right? Or at least that's what I would tell myself. Anyways, this £3,100 includes my mortgage payment, council tax, utilities, internet, everything related to housing. And yes, it's more than half my monthly take-home pay. And yes, it is my fault in a way, but who would have predicted the interest rate spike in 2022? Right? Next up we have is investment and savings at £1,500 a month. Now this went straight out after my mortgage and bill payments. This was intentional because I just wanted to make sure I was putting money, always putting it into my savings and investments before I even touched the rest of my salary. So this money went straight into my stocks and shares ISA, as well as a high interest rate savings account. It's not glamorous, but it was a part of my frugal chic effort, if you know what I mean. And then we have the food and drinks where I spent £450 a month. On average, I spent about this much because I was mostly cooking my lunches and only eating out during the weekends. Here's a little hack though. I mean, if you go to most consulting firms or most investment banks, they will cover your dinner if you work past, let's say, 8 or 9 p.m. And given that I was working until late evening throughout most of my year, I was able to save quite a bit on dinner cost. And I guess it's a silver lining to those brutal hours in a way. Next up we have is transportation, where I spent on £100 on average per month. This is quite low because I was going to the office about 2 times per week, plus taking a few Ubers here and there on weekends. Living in London with decent public transport meant I didn't need a car, which obviously saved me quite a lot. Also, another hack is that most consulting firms or banks will pay for your Uber home if you work past a certain hour, so I also did save a bit of transport cost there as well. Moving up next is subscriptions at £80 a month. Now, when I say subscription, it includes everything from Amazon Prime, Spotify, Netflix, gym membership, and boxing classes too. And honestly, the boxing classes were actually really important for me, as I needed that physical outlet to battle the mental and physical stress. Plus, if you didn't know already, my younger brother is actually an amateur MMA fighter, so I kind of needed to keep my combat skills intact just in case he wanted to spar me again. Alright, and last but not least, I spent £120 on my lovely little cats. Some of you may know I have 2 lovely cats, right? So their food, litter, occasional vet visits, and pet insurance averaged out to around £120 per month. And some of you may say this is excessive, but to me, the costs are worth it because they give me so much joy and love that I actually turned into a homeboy almost after adopting my cats, and I would do anything to literally keep them healthy and happy. So with that being said, after all that expenditure, I was left with just £363 a month on average. Now, this is what I had left for fun each month, right? So clothing, random purchases, coffee with friends, and the occasional nice meal out as well, concert tickets, and sometimes those weekend trips. Again, £363 from a 125k salary. That is what I had for discretionary spending every month. Now, to be fair, this would fluctuate because some month, if I went on a trip abroad or to a big festival, let's say, I would dip into my savings or wait for my bonus, that being said. But on a month-on-month basis, from just my salary, it was that £363. So that's the full picture right there. Every pound accounted for. Okay, now let's talk about my bonus spending. And remember guys, after taxes, I just had £10,000 to work with. And if you've been following me on my Instagram or my TikTok, you know that I'm a big fan of traveling, right? So I spent about £5,000 on my bonus traveling through Asia, both this year and last year combined. So I went to Japan, Korea, Vietnam, and many more countries. And these trips were incredible. And honestly, some of the best money I've ever spent. And because consulting can burn you out at times, these trips were necessary for my mental health and happiness, to be honest. And then now the other £5,000, it kind of went just straight into my investments and emergency savings account because I wanted to make sure that I had a solid financial cushion, especially as I was already thinking about leaving consulting to pursue my own ventures. And if you haven't seen that video yet on why I quit consulting, left the link above, so click on it if you want to know more. So yeah, anyways, that's it. No luxury purchases, no designer clothes, no fancy car, just travel and savings. That's where my bonus went. All right, now let's do a quick summary, right? So when you add up everything, my total annual savings and investments were £23,000 for the year, and my total spending was £55,560 for the year. So to conclude, out of the 125k gross income, I saved 23k, I spent about 56k, and paid 47k in taxes. Now that was the reality for myself.
Okay, so now that you know all the numbers, let me now tell you about how I actually felt earning £125,000 as a consultant. Well, first of all, I had a lot of gratitude for the financial position that I was in, because I know hundreds or if not thousands of people would love to just be in the position that I was in. I was earning way more than the average population in the UK. I had a secure job. Honestly, I was super grateful for where I was, and I know I was in a very privileged position. And still to this date, I'm incredibly grateful for all their skills, all the learning opportunities, and all the people that I met during my 5 years in consulting. It's been a wonderful journey. But at the same time, did I feel rich in London? Honestly, Not really. And I know this is an incredibly sensitive topic, right? Many people will say, oh, you're so ungrateful. You've earned over 100K, which is way more than what people earn in the UK, and you still feel like you weren't rich enough. And I'm sure some of you might have seen news articles about me, right? Saying how I earn over 100K, but I don't feel rich yet. But let me be clear here, right? I am not complaining. What I am trying to say is that the truth is slightly different from the reality. So here are 4 reasons why I did not feel rich in London. First is the tax situation, right? When more than 40% of your income just disappears before you even see it, it kind of is demoralizing. For example, I worked incredibly hard for that £25,000 of bonus, but 15,000 of that went straight into taxes, right? So all that work stress, all that amount of 60, 70 hours every single week, just to have it go all to taxes. And secondly, is the mortgage situation. And I know this is my mistake, right? For not locking in the mortgage for more than 2 years. But who would have known the interest rate would have skyrocketed, right? After COVID. That being said, more than half of my take-home pay went straight into my mortgage payments, a lot of it in actually interest payments. Thirdly, I mean, the lifestyle creep wasn't real, for me at least. I wasn't living a flashy life. As you probably have seen from the news article, I was actually living quite a modest life still. Like, I had no fancy dinners every night. Don't have any designer clothes. As you can see, I probably only wear this nice Ralph Lauren quarter zip in every single one of my videos, because it is genuinely one of the only nicest things that I have. I was mostly cooking at home, taking the public transport, being relatively frugal. And lastly is the comparison trap. And here's what most people actually don't talk about, right? When you are a consultant, or when you are in finance, let's say, or in law, you are surrounded by people that are in similar positions as you. You're constantly surrounded by high earners and high achievers, and even people in private equity that might make 300, 400K, or in hedge fund where they might also make 300, 400K every single year. So at that point, you're not really comparing yourself to the average population in the UK. Your comparison in terms of your peers is people that are earning 2, 3, 4 times more than you. Even though comparison is the thief of joy, you do end up comparing to those higher standards. And I'm not saying this to complain, right? I am saying this, and I'm filming this video because I want graduates and even interns to just realize what actually high salaries mean in the context of being in London. Because the number is impressive, and the lifestyle it affords, more comfortable than most others, right? That is the truth, yes. However, you're not going to be feeling rich like you would imagine when you were at university, for instance. Money is important. Guys, don't get me wrong, it is, but money isn't everything. And trust me, sometimes the dream salary that you think of is not as dreamy as it looks from the outside. All right, guys, so that's the full detailed breakdown of where my 125K of salary went over the last year. I hope this gave you a bit of a realistic picture in terms of a consulting or finance compensation in London and how it actually looks like in practice. I mean, it's easy to see those big numbers and be impressed and be wanting those figures, which is completely fine. But at the same time, I think it's important to have those realistic expectations before you reach that point and realize, actually, there's always more to anything. And if you found this valuable, and I know how awkward money topics can be, please hit that like button because it helps other students as well who are considering these high finance or consulting careers make more informed decisions. And if you're serious about breaking into consulting and want help from someone who's been on both sides of the table and helped also loads of students break into consulting, well, check out the description below on Case Buddy, which is my one-on-one mentorship program that helps you land those dream consulting roles. But even if you don't, I appreciate you watching this far, and please do drop a comment below telling me, A, are you surprised by these numbers? B, does this change your mindset in terms of what high salaries might look like in London? And lastly, what other financial transparency videos would you want to see? I read every single comment and I'll respond to as many as I can. So that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.